it's going to be hard without US support. It definitely makes Ukraine more vulnerable. But if we put our minds to it, we can make sure that Ukraine's got the means to defend itself.
Here at Times Towers, we have a new podcast series just out, hosted. It's called The General and the Journalist. The General is the former Chief of the General Staff, Sir Patrick Sanders, and the journalist is the Times' Tom Newton-Dunn. And they both join us now. Hello to you.
Good afternoon, Adam.
Good afternoon, Adam.
Now, Tom, tell us, what's the theory of this podcast? Obviously, two great minds getting together, but to what end?
You're extremely generous, Adam. Well, Patrick and I have known each other for close to 20 years, actually, when I first embedded with his unit when he was a mere colonel in Basra. We've been friends ever since and have often spoken about the need to explain wars, explain what's going on, explain what conflicts are. And it also coincides with a pretty extraordinary time of the world. The old world order of rules and understanding and how to do things is pretty rapidly ending. State-on-state conflict is growing, and we're entering this really quite scary epoch of, quite frankly, we don't know what's going to happen next with the rise of China and Russia. So we hope to try and unpack all that and try and explain where things are going.
Now, General, you're moving from doing it, being a general, to being an armchair general. Are you a bit apprehensive? You might say the wrong thing.
Well, I'm worried much less about saying the wrong thing now that I'm in an armchair rather than in a tank. Yeah, I mean, it's a little nerve-wracking to become to be poacher turned gamekeeper when most of your career has been trying to avoid saying the wrong thing on podcasts, on media, whatever. So I'm going to learn as I go along.
Now, your first guest is the recent Cabinet Secretary, Simon Case, and he was very forthright speaking to you that there needs to be more defence spending. He said 3% now, whereas we're still moving to 2.5%. What's your feeling, Sir Patrick? I mean, is that going to become the political norm? Are we actually going to really up our spending in a very significant way or not?
Yeah, I think we are. Whether we're doing it fast enough and at the scale we need to is the key question. I mean, as Tom has said, we're entering an era now where the old order's breaking down, and we've got some really direct threats to Europe, to our allies, and to the sort of value system that's really kept us safe over the last at least 30 years, arguably 80 years. And you're already seeing countries across Europe wake up to the fact that Europe is going to have to be reliant on itself for its own security and defence. It's acknowledging that it's got away with spending too little on defence really for the last 30 years. And the figures are very big. You know, you've got Poland spending close to 5%. Germany this week announced that it would be spending up to 5%. The Nordics spend close to 4% already. So 2.5% in 18 months' time is a pretty marginal increase and is not going to be sufficient for the threats that we're facing and the pace at which they could come at us.
Tom, what's your reading? I mean, we've been on the programme today. We've been talking all the time about the economic pressures and the needs perhaps to reverse some of the benefit cuts. Will that money be found?
I think, Adam, that is absolutely the $69 million question. This comes at a time that the government has always struggled for money, I guess, over the last 10, 20 years. Now it is absolutely acute. Everything is creaking at the seams, both benefit spending, but also the NHS, schools. And it is now absolutely abundantly clear to everybody, the government itself admits it, that defence, our security, needs considerable uplift, and not just to tackle the new threats of these rising great powers who have absolutely no care for the rules and the conventions. But also to fill what has been a pretty awful hole in defence. Our nuclear deterrent is creaking at the seams. It needs a lot of money spent. The armed forces numbers have been cut to the bone. They need to come up a bit as well. And we need to invest in all these new technologies that you see playing out on the battlefield of Ukraine now, drone warfare, AI, etc. So it's absolutely crucial that we get a quicker uplift, both Patrick and I believe. And that means incredibly difficult choices for the government. They're either going to have to cut more, raise more in taxes, or the third way, borrow more. And each of those three ways, as you well know, Adam, is incredibly painful and incredibly difficult.
Sir Patrick, Tom there mentions Ukraine, which I suppose is the most pressing defence issue of the moment. America clearly is rolling back its level of support to Ukraine. Is it viable for the rest of NATO, if you like, to go on supporting Ukraine against Russia, or does it just inevitably point to, frankly, a victory for the Russians?
Well, it's not just viable, it's essential, Adam. If we don't, then you've got to understand that Ukrainian security, Ukraine fighting in Ukraine is also fighting for Europe and defending Europe. And when you look at the statements that the President Putin has made, what his war aims are, they're not about territory in Ukraine. They're much more fundamental than that. So it's essential that we do it. It is also viable. It is going to take some time for Europe to step up its defense industry. But the Ukrainians themselves are doing an amazing job at generating an incredibly adaptable organic defense industry there. They're already, with European support, able to pretty much produce the same amount of ammunition, artillery ammunition, that the Russians can, and they're beating the Russians when it comes to the development and incredibly agile transformation of using drones and on the battlefield. So it's going to be hard without US support. It definitely makes Ukraine more vulnerable. But if we put our minds to it, we can make sure that Ukraine's got the means to defend itself.
Very interesting article in the Sunday Times today, basically arguing that Israeli strategy in Gaza is onto a hiding for nothing, in as much as they seem to be targeting both the population and Hamas. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that the only way that we're going to achieve peace in the region is if we identify a path to Palestinian statehood. Now, that doesn't necessarily, you can define what that means, but without that path, then you're just going to see repeated wars on this scale. And occupying Gaza, potentially occupying the West Bank, continuing to deny the Palestinians territory that they can call a state, is just storing up problems for the long term.
Tom, we already said Simon Case in your first episode. What sort of guests are you and Sir Patrick going to be talking to? Who have you got lined up?
Adam, that would be telling. It's basically going to be the two of us, probably 3 times a month. So our dulcet tones wittering on has been doing the last sort of 5 or 10 minutes on breaking down conflicts, what we think of the world and where it's going. But once a month, someone else. So we're lining up quite an interesting US general for the next episode, which will be next interview episode, which would be just before the NATO summit. That's another huge crucial moment, if you like, with President Trump flying over into what is an unbelievably divided alliance at the moment, and really a great risk of where it could go for the future. So that will be talking to some UK politicians, perhaps even some UK members of the armed forces as senior as Patrick, who is currently still in the job. So a wide array, an international perspective, and we've got a lot of good ideas coming. So thank you very much for anybody who feels like they can follow us and download. We're very grateful.
Yeah, Kate has messaged in saying, I missed TND on the radio. Well, he's back. You can catch Tom Newton-Dunn and General Sanders with the General and the Journalist podcast. First episode now available wherever you get your podcasts.